This episode of the podcast is brought to you by bogeydope.com. Are you interested in a career in aviation, whether that be in the military or civilian? Bogeydope.com not only has a suite of courses, but they have a whole lineup of coaches that are there to help guide you through the process. As most of you know, when it comes to aviation, your dream job, you might only get one shot at it, so you don't want to mess it up right out the gate. Let Bogey Dope and their team help you through the process. Both Bender and Vader are fighter pilots in the Guard and Reserve, and I think they can attest to just how difficult it is to become a fighter pilot or any kind of pilot in the Guard and Reserve. It's very selective, and you might only get one shot. So when it comes to it, knowing how to rush a unit, what to wear, how to do a resume, interview prep, bogeydope.com can take you through not only that, but a whole slew of other things. You can click the link down in the show notes below, and you can use the code AFTERBURN for 5% off at bogeydope.com. The Afterburn podcast is brought to you by Wingman Watches. Wingman Watches, founded by a fighter pilot. They make some incredible timepieces. I've talked about them quite a bit, but if you're interested in an awesome timepiece, you can swing over to Wingman Watch or click the link down below. You can build a custom timepiece. If you use the code RAIN10, you get 10% off something that's currently out there. If you mention my name, you'll get a discount on the build. That's wingmanwatch.com.
Altitude.
Tower, Delaware 6 is release to you. Runway 4 left, wind 040 at 5. Clear for takeoff.
Seats high, altimeter 0 eyes, we're clear for takeoff, clear for the airspace. Viper check 2. My right ramp curve was at 354. Set.
Viper 01, be advised the restricted area 6002 is still active.
Lights on.
Next picture 16, 15,000.
Viper 1 targeted.
What's up, and thanks for listening in. This is a little bonus episode. Hopefully it becomes more recurrent, but a bro chat with Vader and Bender. If you remember, we chatted back in July. They've launched the Kodiak Shack podcast, which I encourage you to check out. That's linked down in the show notes. I have an episode dropping on Friday with Jocko Trimble, who is a former F4 driver. He was the last U.S. Air Force F4 shot down in Vietnam and spent 90 days in captivity. Quite an amazing individual. That was a great conversation. That drops on Friday. That is available currently and has been for Patreon supporters a little bit early. And as always, thank you to my Patreon supporters for keeping the podcast going. If you're looking to support the podcast, you can click the Patreon link down below, pick up some swag down in the link below as well, or just swing over to iTunes and drop a rating review. All of that helps the podcast out and keeps me going. With that being said, let's jump into the episode with Vader and Bender.
Well, we can cut out the first couple seconds anyway, so this should be pretty easy. We should all maybe take a turn, and then we'll pick the best one.
There you go. I like that.
It's going to be Ray. Hey, welcome everybody to this is episode 1 of Bender's first Hack at a Podcast. I have my special guest Rain here, this is a big deal for me to land Rain on my first episode. Obviously that's a big deal. And then Vader to boot. I'm excited for all of you guys who get to listen to this. It's going to be awesome. But we got Rain, Vader, and then I'm Bender, your host for this special episode of the Afterburn / Kodiak Shack / Bender's podcast. I got to come up with a better name than that, but we're just going to talk, I guess. All right, Vader, your turn.
All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Kodiak Shack podcast featuring the Bender podcast and the Afterburn podcast. And we're going to talk about maybe some innovation stuff, maybe Rain's story for all of Rain's fans, so you can hear what his experience or what it was like being a student of Rain when he was a FAPE, and maybe some current events, innovation. We got a lot on the table. Rain, you're up.
So the intro I'm using is literally from the first second where Bender said, we can just cut out the intro and it's going to be this whole thing. So mission accomplished.
Yeah.
It's exciting to be able to do this. It's kind of challenging to align our 3 schedules, especially with Bender, out there with a whole baseball team. And then Vader is learning how to fly a big old fat plane. So me, I'm just putzing around with 2 little twins.
You got 2 little twins. So that's harder than 7 kids easily.
I don't even know how I don't even know how you guys did it, because Bender has twins again, plus a baseball team.
I think you're mixing your sports.
I feel like they're turning a year in a week, and I feel like they've been around for 10 years. So
yeah.
No, I feel you're
super easy.
Well, heck, we had our third and we only had one. It was not twins. And we're still like, man, how do people do this? Granted, I left like 3 weeks later to go to the TX. So really it's my wife doing everything, which is pretty standard, I feel bad for her.
It's the Air Force way. I'm sure she's super happy with you right now.
And it's great because we're getting out of the military. We're getting out of the active duty Air Force. It's too busy. I'm never home. And then I go to the Guard to leave for 4.5 months to then have a month TDY to Germany, which is going to be awesome. And then a 3-month TSP to Virginia. So I was like, yeah, this is active duty all over again.
Yeah. And dude, how old is August? He's like 4 weeks, right?
Yeah, he's 6
a little
weeks.
over a month, huh?
Yeah. So we're going on 6 weeks now, but yeah, he's small. He's bulking up. So that's good.
Yeah.
That's what you want.
That's right.
And you're a month into the TX?
No, a week. I've Tuesday. This last Tuesday I started, and it's been.
You
wild.
Can't say that. We got to cut that out though. The IPs know that you're doing podcasts when you should be studying ops.
That's
limits.
true. Well, turns out all I've been doing is studying, and my ground ops are mediocre at best, but I assume that's most TXers. So, well, it's funny. I assume you guys have kind of experienced some of this over the years of kind of doing transition courses or just changing, from a FAPE to another platform. When I was the instructor, like doing seed academics for it's a 3-hour course, and then talking, and I'm engaged the whole time. And then now that I'm the student in the audience, I'm like barely staying awake while the instructor's talking and he's engaged. But as a student, I'm just like, oh man, these systems are destroying my life right now.
That's brutal. We should say too, TX. We keep saying TX. That's transition course. So Vader is going from the F-16 to the F-15. He's taking a step down, a wrong direction, but that's a life choice. How many people are in your class?
There are 3 dudes doing the TX1G, which is, I think it's 18 sorties, maybe 20 sorties. But yeah, it's pretty chill. It's a Strike Eagle dude, but he's been out of the jet for 5 years. So he's not current. And then an A10 guy. And then you see all the C model guys kind of wince when they're like, A10. Ooh, this is going to hurt for you. But,
yeah, it is.
Man.
Yeah. Well, and it's funny because they're like, it's the same motor. I mean, it's the Pratt & Whitney 220 motor, which when you only have one of them in a Block 42 F-16, you're like, this thing's a liability. Apparently the C model accelerates extremely rapidly, but yeah, so it's got the Pratt & Whitney 220s, and it has a fire bottle. It has multiple generators. It's got a lot of stuff that makes learning the systems kind of a nightmare, but apparently as a pilot is very enjoyable. So
it's all steam gauges still, right?
They actually have more screens, but it's the standard center display unit in the F-16 where one just repeats the other one, and you're like, okay, But yeah, it's the jets they're flying up here, the old mechanically scanned radar, but it's still like a massive radar with a ton of power. So it puts the APG 668 and the F-16 to shame. But yeah, it's interesting. They the way the flight controls and everything work. What I was surprised at. So do you guys remember what the ramp weight of the F-16 is?
Like 41,000 pounds. That was the max,
that's
right?
Like some 35. Well, yeah, but before just loaded at zero weapons. Wasn't it like 29,000?
Yeah, 27 or something, right?
27.
Yeah,
okay.
that sounds right.
So
it depends on the motor, right?
The Eagle, the F-15C, is 29,000 pounds ramp weight. And I was like, how is it that light? It's massive. And it's 2,000 pounds heavier than the F-16 without gas. And I was like, that's cool.
Huh. Maybe I got my numbers wrong.
Well, no, it sounds right. Cause I was thinking, doing demo, right? The jet weighed 29.1 with gas in it, 28,000 pounds of thrust. So about that. But then I also remember the number 6 to me is 43.2 for max weight with, a combat loadout. That seems super light.
Well, and I guess when you think about it that way, then if it's 29.1 full of gas with no external bags,
so it's 22 or 23 ramp weight.
Yeah, so I guess that makes sense. So it's 23,000-ish pounds with no gas. So I guess that makes sense because I thought the F-16 was no gas 29. And I was like, how are they the same weight with one a wingspan of 33 feet and one a wingspan of 42 feet? But it's because it's like a solid wing, you know, it doesn't have like leading edge flaps, trailing edge flaps. It's literally like a ton of hydraulics.
Wait, it doesn't have either of those two things?
So this is like, because I'm a C model guy now. I mean, I've never actually flown, but I'm in the TX. But so it is a solid wing. It has, other than flaps and ailerons, the wing is a one solid piece. And this is, again, aerodynamically, like as pilots, you know, because obviously we're all pretty much aero majors.
Naturally.
So the wing was built to like fly at 100 knots at, you know, 1,000 feet off the ground, and also fly at Mach 2 at 40,000 feet. And it's just like, it stalls at different spots and different, you know, so it's the standard, like true aero pilot's wing. It's just, it was built really well, I guess. Again, I'm a geography major, so I don't actually know. That's just what I was thinking.
Some aerospace majors listening to this and they're like, these guys are idiots. You're like, yes, that's valid.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah. I'll stay in my lane. Yeah.
I don't know. You push it forward, it goes fast. Pull up, blue sky, push down, green. You know, depends what you want.
Yeah.
Pretty much. Except for you can over G. This is the first plane that you'll have flown that can over G, right?
That's true. And it tells on you.
Oh,
yeah. It actually says, I told them they need to upgrade. So it's not just like a robotic sound, like over G. It's got to be like over G, you know, like something out of some video game. But yeah, it gives you in the HUD your instantaneous G available. So if you're too fast or you have like asymmetric like inputs. So if you have some aileron, you'll just watch like 9 Gs go to like 6.5. And you're like, well, so hopefully I don't pull too many Gs, but you have a beeper and stuff. So, but you can accelerate into an over G.
Sure, it'll be fine.
Yeah. No big deal.
The first over G is free, they say. So that's good.
That's good.
I got in the B1 sim and it does something like that. It's like a breathing G, which I think the T38C eventually, like maybe incorporated logic, but I was in the B1 sim and I over G'd it every single time I turned. Cause you know, like it would change something. And again, there's some,
it's a 2G limit, isn't it?
Yeah. And again, like I'm just going to do a nice, easy 15-degree bank and over G. Like, I can't do anything in this plane. It's terrible.
Yeah.
It's like when you ask them in mission planning, like, how long's your spin? And they're like 3 minutes. You're like, I don't think so. How long is your spin? You're not over G spin. I don't need 6 minutes. Yeah.
That's what I thought.
Better safe than sorry. Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. Oh man. So how's the mighty F-35 there, Bender?
It's so good. It's pretty good. It's been fun. Had a busy week, flew a couple times. What did we do this week? So we do the same. I always feel like I complain about the F-35, so I'm going to take a different approach. It's a cool jet. It does awesome stuff.
It's got skinny little legs.
Nice.
Yeah. We like shot some stuff. We have, we've talked about the training, the embedded training, and how like crappy it is. So funny story, I suppose. It was a guy's upgrade. So we do a lot of mission commander stuff. So he's like a new flight lead, but he's also getting his like mission commander look. Yeah. So it's 8 blue and 4 red, plus the IADs, so all the surface-to-air missile layout. And we use embedded training, which is the synthetic threats that the F-35 can kind of generate. But there's limitations. So you can only have 4 people on the same scenario at the same time. So each force ship has to run their own individual scenario. And then if that breaks down, then each individual airplane has to run their own individual scenario. And then for each, so there's always a host. The threats can only shoot the host, I think is how it works. Anyway, there's a lot of limitations to it, bottom line. But the worst part is if you try to run it and it doesn't run, you have to reset it. And then it changes your loadout back to a preset loadout. So we're like at push time, push across the line, getting ready to shoot some stuff. And the flight lead, who's a new flight lead, is like, ET's not working. I'm going to reset it real quick. So he resets it as we're trying to like get ready to drop bombs. But it takes all your bombs away, reloads bombs that you don't want, and then changes all your profiles. So We did it, no kidding, 5 different times this flight lead reset the ET thing. And by the last one, I'm like, I don't care what weapon gets loaded on my airplane. Like, I'm just going to drop whatever it is on whatever is out there. So it was pretty painful, but I don't think we had one. Maybe there was like one validly dropped bomb with the correct weaponeered profile, you know. Everything else is like, whatever, just pickle. We'll see what happens.
It's something. It went off the jet. I didn't realize this.
It pretended to go off the jet.
So I did an episode with Mace that just came out, my last one I released, but we're talking piddle packs. And Billy Flynn, who is the chief test pilot for the F-35, I had him on previously, and he sent me an email about it. He was saying that the piddle pack is not authorized in the F-35. Guys still use it, and gals, I guess. But you guys have some special magical system. Is that true?
There is a special magical system. It involves suction, so nobody touches the thing. And I'm pretty sure you have to it's like a suitcase. You gotta carry it around. It might even filter out your urine so you can drink it or something. Probably. But we just use pill packs. And you have to completely unstrap because you have the center piece of your hole, all the straps go in right over your lap. So there's no access to anatomical parts, if you will, unless you take everything off. So
it's like the 5-point harness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you're flying 2.5s. 7-point harness.
It's only a 7-point harness. It has little arm ones that bring your arm in. That's where you get the extra 2.
It's funny.
Yeah.
It's funny the way you talk about that ET, because I've heard other 35 pilots talk about it, and maybe they just don't want to let the cat out of the bag because they're like, yeah, it's great. You can do all these things. It's amazing. It's one of the best training things we have. Like, why do you even need emitters when you have training like this? And then I always think back to the way you talk about it. And I'm like, oh man, I wonder, maybe it's somewhere in the middle, but I trust your perspective more, having fought TMTs and understanding
not in the middle. That was my positive spin of the ET.
Yeah.
That's pretty good, I thought.
The Bullet, I don't know his last name. He's a captain wingman who transitioned from the C model. He's out at Hill with you.
Yeah. I think I met Bullet.
He was just up here. He did some F-35 Capes brief. So that was interesting.
Nice. Yeah, ET. Well, I don't know how much. I don't know. Apparently there's some new versions that people have modified in other countries that are way better than ours. So I think we're going to buy from the Dutch a better version of our own program.
Nice. Well, have you seen this thing that Red 6 is working on?
I read a little bit about it, but I don't
Rain,
hear about it.
I don't know if you've looked into it at all. It sounds, it almost reminds me of those old Air Force commercials where it's it's not science fiction. It's, whatever those were. It's legitimately, you will fight BFM, visual maneuvering against a virtual construct through your helmet that's out the window. So you offensive, high aspect, whatever BFM, and you're going to legit just fight it straight up. Visual maneuvering, not hey, this thing's super far away and the computer knows it's there so I can shoot it. It's I look out the window and I'm watching it fly in relation to me. And I was I have so many questions. I don't, the jet can barely handle the processing that's going on now, right, let alone creating this AR thing.
It's got to be augmented in the helmet or some kind of this. So funny. I had Bond, who is the CEO of Red 6, on the podcast, one of my first episodes, in episode 007. That's call sign Bond. But because he has a very interesting story, tornado driver, first Raptor exchange from the Brits, but he didn't have a very good, he had some challenges in his upbringing that he overcame. So we talked a lot about that. And then Red 6 had just it had been around, but he talked about how he got his plane and it kind of came about. And then I saw it was 2 weeks ago, Boeing with the T7 and the F-15EX signed some kind of big contract to, I guess, take it into the T7 and into the F-15EX, I suppose. I got into the T7 sim at Oshkosh, which, building on the TMT from the Viper and being able to, practice against building simulated emitters to go out there, train and fight. Sounds like Obviously the F-35 has, another version that's come along, but that's the way it has to develop in order to kind of present enough problems for guys to go out there and solve. There's just not enough like either metal you can throw in the air or enough emitters you can put on the ground to actually replicate very complex problems. Really, I mean, Bender over there in his 5th gen world, like he needs some really, really complex stuff to go out there to make him a really sharp tool, so to speak.
Yeah. And SA2 actually will do it for us.
Say no more.
Yeah. But Red 6, I mean, the problem is looking at it from a Jehemix user where you could align the thing on the ground, then in the air, and it's still not exactly where the plane is. You look out the window and it's like, hey, the target location is not where it actually is. And now I'm going to do augmented reality training off of that. Like you need a new helmet, you need better visuals. Like it's a big lift, but I mean, if Red 6 does it, I hope so. Cause that would be, I mean, there could be some cool training there.
Bender's,
you got to think how much Red Air training they would save.
Yeah. But
like $35,000 an hour.
Yeah.
To fly F-35's Red Air.
And you'd say that's probably like good enough to like, it's not quite in the exact spot in space that it should be, but it's again, saving us $5 billion in flying hours or whatever it is. Like the training's good enough. Is your helmet better than the Jehemix, Bender?
In some ways, I think so. I don't see your red dot anymore, Ray. I don't know if we lost your recording or not, but
yeah, I'm not. Again, there's so many backups here. Like no one needs to see my face.
Not worried about it. It'd be cool if we were just answering questions that weren't actually asked on the recording. That'd be pretty fun. So it aligns pretty well. So as far as like Mattel, that's probably more of a function of how good Mattel is, which is our inner flight data link, So it's like links. We have link 16 also, but then we have our F-35 specific data link. That's like spot on. That's like that thing sits on the helmet of your wingman. So it's pretty good. And the refresh rate's obviously really fast. So that's really accurate. As far as one of the really frustrating things, and I would have to be interesting to hear actually how it's been going at like Tyndall shoots and stuff. But for a while, for the first whatever banner shoots they did, they could not hit the banner with the F-35 gun because the alignment of the helmet and where the bullets were going, those things don't match up. So if you put your pipper on something on like the ground, say if you're doing like high angle strafe. So I've done this before. If I aim at the tank that I'm trying to shoot, I will miss the tank. But if I put my next to shoot, which is what we call like our target or whatever, what would we call that in your SPI, right?
Yeah. Something like that.
If I put that over the tank, and it could be like off to the right of my actual like display. But if I just put the pipper on the green goo that I generated from my target pod, then it'll shack the tank. So anyway, you just got to get used to not shooting at things that you see. You got to shoot at the green stuff. Because then it's pretty accurate.
It's super easy. It sounds disorienting.
Well, it's not made for CAS either. So to try to like generate your own shootable like target on the ground that's pretty tough to do.
I did
see
it.
It makes sense though, because it's a bore side air.
Yeah,
it's the air, the standard like, I have to do a tape title and a like HUD check because the bore side's not perfect.
I remember those.
And then every single pilot is going to sit in a different position. So bore sight can almost always be wrong.
That's right. It is. But it's a nail driver when I don't think there's a mil dispersion like there is in the Viper gun. So it doesn't spread the bullets out. So it's like if you put the thing on the thing and you shoot, track and don't move much, I mean, the bullets are just like follow each other into their own hole, so to speak.
That's awesome.
So that's pretty cool.
Yeah. Unless you're missing. So you're either spot on or you're just
the hole might not be on the thing that you're shooting at. Yeah, that's true. The bullets blow up, I think, so that helps.
Wasn't it your GBU-12 that dudded but knocked the motor out of the engine compartment on our first deployment?
Yeah, the most expensive bongo truck in the entire world. We dropped a GB54 and it hit like just a couple feet to the side. So it blew it off the road as it was driving, which is awesome. So the guys got out and they all like ran, and then we took care of them. And then we came back to finish off the bongo truck or whatever. So I dropped a GBU-12, so the second bomb, and it shacked right through the engine compartment and just put this massive hole where the motor used to be. And the GA-Tech's like, not good enough. That thing needs to be nothing. Like, it's not going to work anymore. I said, like, it does not have a front end. Like, nope, it's got to go off high order. So we put another GBU-12 on it, and it was gone. I'm like, that was a $700,000 bongo truck right there.
Upgrades.
Yeah. I gained a lot of respect for GBU-12s though. Like when I saw how accurate they could be, I was like, I have no questions. Like, this is a solid bomb if you do your job right.
Yeah. I thought they were nail drivers. We stopped dropping them. We dropped them like halfway through our deployment. Then the winter came because as we like ripped out Bender there and, the whole Middle East.
And Vader was there too.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Gosh, man. Isn't that crazy that that was 8 years ago? That was like 8 years ago, almost to the day as we're talking about.
Yeah, almost to the day. Right.
Oh, that's wild.
Ugh. Time flies when you're having fun. Yeah, you guys really, I've talked about it in other podcasts. You guys were really kind of like busy. Can you switch gears from kind of a CT training deployment to, oh, hey, there's a thing called ISIS. And now you guys need to go protect the embassy in Baghdad for 10 hours at a time or however insane you guys were flying, and then launching into Syria, just getting after it.
Well, I remember because we were trying to do a naming for our flight doc, and we had some solid names that would never go through, but we had really good names that we wanted to name them. But they were like, "Hey, this is when you could still leave base," and they were like, "Go get a ton of shawarma. We're gonna have a squadron event." So I go and I pick up like 3 platters of just ton of shawarma and hummus and everything. And the first person I see is my flight commander, Smack Ballsizer, and he's like, "You've been in crew rest for 2 hours." And I was like, understood. And, cause it was like, we are going like, dawn, like, before dawn, like lights out crossing the border. He was like, "That's happening, just so you know." And I was like, holy cow. I mean, I was still first lieutenant when this all was going down. And I was like, okay, here we go.
Right place, right time.
Wow.
You should tell them about your first thinking that night, Vader. I remember I was on the radio. I'm like, whoa.
That was a significant emotional event.
Was it spicy?
Yeah. So, I mean, well, again, life is tough when you're bad at your job. And, we just flown from Japan to Singapore to the Middle East. And I mean, we tanked a ton of times. I mean, tanking was not uncommon at this point. But now we're like fully combat loaded out. We've got 400 or 500 pound bombs, like live weapons, guns full. And we literally this is combat. It's not training. We're in tactical line abreast. So we're about 1.5 miles, 2 miles separated, 3 and 4, about 2-3 miles in trail, also a couple miles separated, and crossing into country. Like we turn all of our lights off, all of our everything. And so you can't even see each other. I was like, I don't think this is safe at all, but whatever, I'm just number 2. So we rejoin on the tanker, and cause bingo was pretty high, bingo was like, so fuel you had to go home with was like 5,500 pounds or something. And so we get to the tanker, and then our squadron commander, he gets his gas, obviously, because he's like black border patch. He's been doing this all the time. He was probably drinking a Diet Coke while getting gas. And it's like 4. Yeah. That was my only job. He was like, "Your job is to ensure I have Diet Cokes." And I was like, okay. But so he gets gas. So it's 1 and 2 on the left wing, 3 and 4 on the right wing. 1 gets gas, and then he kind of proceeds outboard of me as I'm now on the tanker's wing. And then I go to get gas, and I kind of move forward. It's nighttime. So you flip the MVGs up, and I can't get gas. I move forward, and it's return to stern. So I like move back, and then I like move forward again, and he's like, return to stern. So I do this like 3 or 4 times, and then the squadron commander is like, hey, get out of the way, let 3 and 4 get their gas. So I move out of the way, and while I'm waiting for 3 and 4 to get their gas, my bingo warning goes off, and I just go on the aux radio. I say 1, 2 bingo, and he goes, okay. And so, I mean, I'm the mayor of Cockpit City. Theoretically, my job is to go home right now, which I don't, because I'm like, well, he would have told me. So 3 and 4 get gas, and he's like, all right, 2, get in there and get your gas. And so I get back over there, and now I'm about 4,000 pounds of gas. And so like, yeah, odds are, who knows? So I move forward, and they say return to stern. So I back up again. And then I look down, and I'm at 3,200 pounds of gas. And I should have gone home with about 5,000 to 5,500 pounds of gas. So the odds of me making it back to our base is very low. And we're relatively close to Baghdad at this point. So I was like, I might end up in Baghdad, like legitimately. And so like, because as a wingman, you never really say these things. You know, you don't really talk on the radio. You know, it's like to lead your own fire, you know, that kind of stuff. And I like go on the primary radio to talk to the tanker. And I was like, dude, I really need gas. Like I said those exact words. And I move forward, and then we plug in, and then I get gas. And then I literally didn't fall off the tanker for another like 4.5 years. And so it was one of those things, like whatever it was, it just like, it clicked. And then we tank like 200 times in like 2.5 months after that. But yeah, it was a harrowing experience, and I never understood how harrowing it was until I told my wife that story, and she's like tears streaming down her face. And I was like, "Ooh, geez, that's bad."
The self-preservation piece of that, there's a couple aspects you can take apart. Bender, do you remember it was the Gamblers deployment? Well, I was the demo guy, but I was a safety chase for one of the elements. I think it was like a 6-ship, 4-ship was like the plan, the different cells. And there was, like 2 ground spares, 2 air spares, and a safety chase for each formation. And I was the safety chase for the first element or first formation. And like, of course I crank, and I'm the first jet that's good. Everyone else is red ball, red ball, red ball. So they're calling maintenance. So I'm like, I'm just going to go taxi. I went and taxied down a demo to get out of the way. But that was the night. Let's see. I was the second formation, and I didn't air spare forward. I safety chased forward like the first element just to go. But do you remember what happened with like was it the second element where they ended up launching? They're supposed to have 9 jets. They launched 10 jets. Do you remember that story?
Yeah. Oh yeah. I don't know if we're allowed to say names, but
yeah, you would tell the story better than I would. I'll give it to you.
Well, I was at Avon, so I was already in country, but when everybody finally got to Afghanistan, they're like, dude, you've got to do this story. But apparently it was the second. I can't remember, because there were 3 cells of 6. We had 18 jets.
Because someone scraped the stabs off the jet, or the
so that was one guy. Yep. So that was bad. So he got put on an airplane to be ferried over as not the pilot. So he made it in country. It was a really bad. That was like the worst AOS probably of all time.
That's valid.
But yeah, it was number 6 in the second cell. Got confused. So there's 3 number 6s out there, and because there's 3 different formations of 6. And so bottom line, they get confused on which cell is actually blasting because there's so much trauma. And so the second cell launches with 7 airplanes, unbeknownst to all of them, until they get on the tanker. And they're like, okay, number 6, it's your turn. And 2 airplanes go to get gas. Or whatever. Yeah, it must have been number 5s or not 5s. I guess it was probably 6s. Anyway.
It was 6s. It was definitely 6s. I do.
It was 6s, I think. Yeah.
Wingman,
Yeah, it wasn't 5s. It was 6. So the original 6 was like 1. Like, there's somebody else is trying to get gas right now, and he's like 6 is on the boom or whatever, like all authoritative, like 6 is getting gas. He's like, I'm number 6. He's like, negative, I'm number 6. Like, and then finally he's like, what is happening? Because they have like zero idea like that any of this has happened until, and this is like 2:30 in the morning or whatever. like approaching New Hampshire, wherever they're trying to go to. And so eventually they're like, just say your name. Like, who are you? And he's like, I'm this person. I'm this person. And he's like, okay, you're not supposed to be with us, but you're already on the boom. So get your gas. The original number 6, turn back, like go back to the next cell or whatever. And so he got kicked out of his original formation and had to go fly back and find the next formation. It was a train wreck, like full train wreck, like the entire way. But
I can't imagine.
Eventually we got 18 jets in theater. Going home was only a little bit better.
It's like what people don't realize is happening at like 3:00 in the morning on the Eastern Seaboard is, these, I don't know, I guess over $1 billion worth of jets are flying, to go over to the Middle East and shenanigans. That was such a bad, it could have been so bad, confusion, but hey, you just stay visual and don't do it. I remember out of that too. Remember, there's always like this configuration discussion of what the actual limitations are of that configuration going cross country. So for those listening to obviously the Viper can be configured differently with different bombs, missiles, pods, etc. And that changes the max G available, the max speed available, etc. Well, normally like a cross country config, like you'd fly around the demo, you'd have some fake wingtip missiles, which you need for wingtip flutter. Again, some aerospace engineer out there is having an aneurysm, but you're limited 0.95 Mach for the travel pod and then 5 Gs for that too. But this configuration, I remember, was 0.85 limited. And it's like, you kind of like sometimes like, there's an engineering, 150% in there, I'm sure. Like it's not really 0.85. That's pretty slow. So I'm the last dude taking off as the safety chase, and I'm going 0.85. And the plane is shaking violently to the point where I pull my flashlight out and I look at the wings to like make sure they're still attached and pieces aren't flying off of them. And I have, I'm locked, radar locked in trail. And the string is just, and I got the link. So you see it like the flight leads over Myrtle Beach. I'm leaving Shaw. We're strung out like 80 miles trying to work this rejoin. Everyone else is, facilitating the rejoin. And I'm at 0.85. I'm like, there's no angles that you guys are working. You're all in a straight line, yet somehow you have this closure. So you like lock them up and you see their speed and you see your speed. You're like, well, it's slightly faster than I'm going right now. But I remember that configuration sucked, whatever it was and whatever the limitation was. But I think it was for like
when I know a lot of it was like, it was probably a WOM, but it's like, no, it's only 0.85 if it's on the wing, if it's under the belly, it's, and you're like, I feel like we're making stuff up so we can go 0.9. But yeah.
I think
there's some memo out there, I think some waiver that existed on somebody's iPhone somewhere. They're just forwarding around to each other.
Yeah. I went with, I don't know, Vader, if you met Rush Fulkerson, he was a FAPE when you're going through the 41st. And then he was a Tiger at Shaw and then one of the test pilot school. Great dude. But his job after TPS at one point, like he was responsible for the F-16-2. Again, for those listening, that thing is like 700 pages thick and it is all the speeds, max, all the configuration limitations for everything imaginable in the F-16. It's insane just the amount of data that goes in there, but you have to have a PhD to read that thing, in my opinion. And probably still to this day, if you ask someone when the jet is full up 9 Gs with an HTS pod on the chin, you will get different answers from different people. Like, oh yeah, when tanks are dry, or no, it's when it's 5.8. Like no one knows. God knows how many times the jet has been and pod's been over G'd and asymmetrically over G'd. I remember asymmetric over G'd. That was the thing that like popped up towards the end of my demo days. I asymmetrically over G'd one like a boss one day, which hacked the OG.
You probably asymmetrically over G'd every day.
I try to pull straight through. I remember Hack, he called me one day. He goes, hey, do you remember the sortie on this date and this date? And I'm like, it was a weekend. So I'm like, well, it was an air show. And you look at him, I was like, Evans was like, yeah, you asymmetrically over G'd like da-da-da-da-da. I'm like, well, I could see that being a possibility. maybe once or twice.
But it looked good, right? I guess
that's right. The people were happy. They were down there clapping. Everyone was cheering freedom,
Well, I think the F-16, because it doesn't tell on you, it doesn't say like, all right, party's over, go home. I mean, well, in the counter hobs, you're like pulling, you're turning across the adversary's tail. You don't unload and roll and reset your lift vector. You just do a loaded roll at like 6.5 Gs. And I'm pretty sure that's above the asymmetric G limitations, but you got to win.
Probably rolling into the BSA pattern. You're probably asymmetrically over G'ing it, like it's into the break.
Especially my BSA. My BSA was never good,
You don't have to worry about that now in the Eagle. You can't say the word bomb, I don't think.
That's right, Dave. It seems like they've gotten a little more used to it, but yeah, it's. I try not to bring that stuff up. I'm just like, you're
one of the guys.
Happy to be here, proud to serve.
You got your chalk. Threw away all your whiteboard stuff.
So I don't know if you're joking, but it's like legitimately there are chalkboards in the rooms to like literally chalk things up.
Are there whiteboards?
Like, okay.
Do people use whiteboards there?
There are both. So at Fresno, it's like you look at one wall and it's a chalkboard. You look at the other wall and it's a whiteboard. And I'm like, there you go. And they have computers. So it's got like, 40 years of fighter technology in one room.
What if I walked into the Raptor vault for a Wessup at Tyndall before it got wiped off the face of the earth. And I do remember seeing whiteboards and chalkboards. And I was like, this is insane. Chalk. I don't even know who makes chalk anymore.
Yeah.
Where
do you get multicolored chalk?
Yeah.
Yeah, you could, right?
It is. I am certain of it.
For sure.
Yeah. Yeah. I've seen it in person. Yeah.
Do they have chalk holders like we do, like with their names on it and everything?
I haven't seen chalk holders. They have the same like pen, like whiteboard marker holders. But yeah, I jokingly said I was going to bring like a bunch of sidewalk chalk and but just like buckets. But I won't actually do that. I'm not trying to make enemies.
I know people are listening to this who are not fighter pilots probably don't get it, but again, little backstory here. Like, I don't know, maybe around like the turn of the century when whiteboards became a thing for like the rest of the world, the Air Force and the fighter community migrated away from chalkboards and used whiteboards, except for the F-15 community that held on to the way that, I don't know, it used to be, or I think they say like you can be much more accurate with it is what I've been told. I don't believe that at all, but it's like, you like this harassment program we need to do. Cause I did a weapons school WIC support, F-15, Red Air support. And I was like, that was the most excruciating for a TI debrief, the most excruciating debrief I think I've ever been in, where they, you have to get literally all your data for every minute so they can ask you if that's as depicted as they draw and recreate this whole fight.
Yeah. Like, I'm wherever you want me to be. Like, put me on the board.
Yeah.
That's where I was.
Yeah. I don't know where I am. So yeah, sure. Yes.
Did you receive a kill? Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. I think it's because it's not even like just the little part of the fight. It's like redrawing the entire GPS God's eye view of the fight just with chalk, right?
Yeah. Which, as you mentioned, does exist on the computer that's sitting no less than a foot away.
Yeah. It's crazy, but yeah, the thing I'm excited about is, all I got to worry about is some air to air missiles and the BFM seems like it's a lot more difficult, just because it's like any given day, like you're better or worse than the other guy. Where in the F-16, it was like pulled to the limiter, like the jet will give you as much as the jet can. Where here it's like, if you ask for too much, the jet won't give you anything. So you have to like ease off to allow the jet to do the things, because again, like the wing is no longer doing the stuff you want it to do. So you got to give it less AOA.
That is pretty cool. I wanted to jump back to the chalk because I've bidden off on this, but I think it's a good parallel between what you're doing at the Kodiak Shack and innovation. I think I might've mentioned it. I mentioned the Fighter Pilot podcast. They had the DARPA guy on there, and he asked Jello, he's like, hey, how many traps do you have? And Jello, just like any naval aviator, knows exactly how many traps he has because it's a point of pride. And I get it. That sounds terrifying and that's a tough thing to do. But his argument was like, if we could leverage technology and we make it easier to land on the boat, like you obviously still need to know how to land on the BOAT, but if it's the point where it's a non-event and it's just putting your pants on to go to work, could you take all that time you focus spending on landing on the boat and be a better, fighter pilot of breaking things and killing things, right? So that's the piece. Like, there's ACMI, there's, live reconstruction, all this technology out there is like, is it valuable, do you think, to like, hey, we need to chalk this all up? I know that's probably really ingraining it, but if you spent less time focusing on that and more maybe on like what the capabilities of this missile might have done, yada, yada, yada. Like, what do you think about that? I know innovation is kind of your thing.
Yeah. And I think the biggest thing, and I think that we do this in a lot of communities, whether it's the fighter community or in the fighter community in different platforms, is what is the desired learning objective? Is our desired learning objective and is it make you more capable at your job? Then maybe you keep it. But if it's the DLO is we've always done it this way, so we're going to keep doing it this way, then it doesn't make sense, because like you said, like leverage technology to allow you to do, all of these things. Like the fight's not getting any easier. So let's use the technology to help us land on the boat so we can spend more gas training, or use data analytics on our flight tracked GPS lines to tell us where to focus our debrief. So instead of a 4-hour BFM instructor pilot upgrade debrief, you spend 20 minutes each set, because it literally helps you focus your efforts into those areas. It doesn't alleviate you from providing instruction. It helps you focus your instruction. Or Red 6, like you can get more reps and more blue air looks because you have technology helping you. So I think it's more, what are we gaining and what are we losing from the technology? And if we're better at our job at the end of the day, then use technology all the time, I say.
But keep the chalk. But keep the chalk.
Yeah. Oh, well, obviously we can't
keep the chalk.
Yeah. I say all that to say chalk stays.
We just get rid of the whiteboards. Keep the chalk. Skip the whiteboards. Go to ACMI.
Yeah. You can tell it's like an age thing. It's like there's some older C model dudes who to this day still only use chalk for their boards. And then there's like the younger guys, probably like a couple years younger than us, that are like, chalk is dumb. So you can see like in the next few years, I'm not sure which will end first, the C model or the chalkboard, but maybe they'll go at the same time. But yeah, it's on its way out because the younger guys they're not sold on the chalk,
I think about that with our briefing all the time, because, all three of us would probably design a very similar board, a similar like setup and flow and cadence to our briefs, Yeah. And we draw like these really specific pictures to show a very specific example. And I'm like, that, I don't know, like it feels good as the instructor to like be able to do that. You're like, yes, like that was awesome.
Yeah.
But I've sat in a lot of briefings and I never, ever care like about that. You know what I mean? Like that's not what I'm like thinking about something else. Like, how am I not going to screw this up? Or like, anyway, I think, and I've seen a couple guys do it in the F-35, but we have all this great footage of like actual missions where we're doing this thing. You know what I mean? A brief should just be like, let's pull up yesterday's like lines and video and like, you know what I mean? Like this is exactly what it's going to look like, because this is exactly what we did yesterday. And these are what the emitters look like. This is what your weapons page is going to look like. And let's just spend 45 minutes and watch yesterday's fight. I'm like, that would be way better than, than what we put ourselves through. I think definitely fighter pilot briefings are, a pretty high standard. I think they're awesome, but I do think that we are not as good, or it could be better. There's so much technology, so much data out there that we don't even touch, that we probably could be using.
Yeah, it seems like there's a little bit of a haze, or like that's the way it's always been. So in order to prove yourself, like it's tough to brief, it's tough to debrief. And so being able to do that and going through that process again, kind of is like, all right, hey, this person meets the merit to at least be standing on the stage to go out there and do it. But it does seem like it's somewhat antiquated, or it could incorporate new things or embrace, the world has evolved, the planes evolved, technology has evolved. So maybe it should adjust somewhat. I go back to Cash Young, who was my DO when I showed up, and the dude was like weapons school instructor of the year, like twice while he was out at 16th, and great dude. I learned so much from him, and just the very, like, he was very brief and to the point, with nearly everything. Like his debrief might have been 30 minutes. And like in that 30 minutes, he can capture all the highlights and you're not jabbing a pin in your eye and you walk away with there like some like good lessons learned. But I do remember, I think he was big like on shot doc, which was like, you know, guys would go through their shot doctrine. So again, for those listening, like depending on the mission you're going out there today to do, the threats, how many missiles you have, how many planes you have, like your shot doctrine, like when you're going to start shooting enemy planes at range would vary. And the flight lead was responsible for briefing what the game plan was or what the game plan is and when you're going to start shooting at what different points. But it can get like not complex, right? But it's something, it can be different from person to person, day to day. And there are reasons why that would be valid. But his like, you know what, like once the missiles start flying and like, you're really doing this, like, are you really sitting there waiting to like, okay, not yet, now, you know, and like, you know, comms are screaming, you're trying to stay in formation. I don't know. Again, it's changing too, just in the, 4 years since I've really been gone. Now Bender's really again out there just solving complex problems, things that I can't even imagine.
We are. It's pretty complex out there.
Tip of the spear.
Well, I think one of the things of it, and I know we were all that flight lead upgrade student who's sitting there trying to brief something you don't understand. And then on the other side, BIP looking at the FLUG upgradee, and you're like, he does not understand what he's talking about right now. And so I think there's some goodness of like making them do the dog and pony show, especially in upgrades, because that like, it helps you understand where to focus your instruction. It forces them to try to understand these complex things. But I agree. I mean, McIntyre, I think the weapons school, like I know a lot of places use like a BRI, like a blended like debrief or brief tool that is like snippets of the actual displays in the aircraft. So it's not your or my drawings that are like maybe 80% true to life. They're actually much more realistic. It's the real thing. So you're like, this is exactly what it looks like. Kind of like what you're saying. Like, I know this to be true because it's from the airplane,
It would be cool if the mission planning software was so like quick that you could actually go out there like with like the threats you're expecting and maybe recreate a radar snapshot, and like bring that in the brief. However, that would take you probably 2 weeks to do, maybe, and then you wouldn't be able to get to whatever computer and yada yada yada. Like,
Well, so this was one of the things you guys will love to hate this. So when I picked up the seed top off course at Holloman, I roll in and I was like, all right, let's see these scenarios. And the scenarios are, they're fighting IHawks, which is a U.S. surface-to-air missile that they produced and they sold to other countries. So this is their primary longer-range threat, was the IHawk. And I was like, not like any Russian-made SAMs or anything. And so I was like, all right, we're going to update it to like today's current baseline. So I go in and I'm like, all right, how do I build a scenario? And they're like, oh, it's really easy. You can build it in your jumps in the squadron, or you can build it here. You have like your jumps interface, like your mission planning interface. So I'm like, okay, cool. So I get a login, I access it and I build it. And they're like, okay, now all you have to do is build a threat entity simulation, a TES, I think is what it's called, which you've allocated everything, but now you have to actually make these simulated threats associated with everything you built and then merge those things to then make them operate. And so we do all this, which takes literal months, like 2.5 months to do. And then I finally start running the scenarios in standard because I throttled up the threats to the actual threats that they're going to fight when they get to the CAF. None of them worked. It was like hit or miss. They'd maybe turn on, maybe they wouldn't turn on. And so we had all these like scenarios that literally took months to build that didn't work. And I was like, this is my nightmare. Because I can't, like, if you went on DCS, like Digital Combat Simulator, an amazing thing. You could go out and never having used it before, build a scenario and fly a scenario in a day. And that would be as good of training as going into our like $7 million simulators and do that. And I think that's our problem.
Yeah, that's crazy. If you wanted to bring DCS into, a simulator in the squadron, like let's, forgo classification issues. like just to go out and buy that and buy the equipment to make a simulator, like good luck. I don't know. Like, like I know you're familiar with the process. Like I, as a one each, I would say dude who's not familiar with procurement things, I would say that would take years and maybe not even come out fruitful.
We tried exactly that. We tried to buy the engine, which I believe is the correct term, like the pretty much the core of the software, and then make it our own, and then have somebody build onto it what we wanted. And it was a non-starter. They were like, nope, not a chance. And we were
crazy.
Okay. Even though people are using it, A10s, but they use it because they're A10s and they're like, this is the best simulation. But I flew an F-16.
It's so accurate.
It literally is. I flew an F-16 in DCS and I was like, this is legit. Like it was very nice, but we won't see it. And if you talk to anybody in the like acquisition space, they're like, oh, you don't want that. And then they try to funnel you into this other program that's trash, that you'll spend just as much money on to not get good training. And you're like, okay, well, we're just stuck.
Well, on that note,
that's not good news.
It was fun talking, guys.
Yeah. They'll figure it out. Maybe. Well, that's Red 6. Red 6 can fix that stuff.
Kodiak Shack has solutions for all these problems.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
I'll say,
I know General Brown, like, was his like innovator die letter, but I saw a couple blips pop up last day or two about things again with just not being agile and responsive. We have all these systems and procurement, rules, laws, yada, yada, yada. It just goes on and on and on. That just makes it so cumbersome to do anything. But, like China, obviously, whatever they need to do to win, they're going to go out and we want this. We're just going to do this. Like there's no stopping them when it comes to that. Right. If they want to do it versus like, I don't know, you want to do something, good luck. They are pushing towards that. And they are trying to make people innovate, get around these like classified silos and make people share. Because the easiest way to keep your information safe is to never share it with anyone. So that is like most of our classified program managers are just like, you just never get to see or interact with this data, and then it's safe. What we're seeing right now is some of the primes that have these massive contracts that some of our innovation companies, they need access to it because obviously the prime owns the information right now. They won't let those companies access the data because it's not in their best interest. So like a PEX is not going to be like, sure, just have all the data you want from our PEX like database so you can replace us in the future. So companies that are like trying to work in the space of like scheduling or mission planning in the vault or that, they don't have to participate. There's nothing in their contract that makes them. So that's going to be a definite challenge is as these programs hit commercialization, like how are they actually going to be utilized? Because sometimes they run into a brick wall because they just can't access the software, that they need to actually be useful. Yeah, these are complex problems, but it really should be. But I know it's more than just saying, "Hey, go do this." Deal with again laws and proprietary information, and obviously it's competition. So I don't know.
Well, and they can always fall back on their contract and say like 2-star, 3-star, 4-star general. Nowhere in our contract does it say we have to release this information to anyone other than us, because just like we saw with F-16 operating systems, like we pay an organization to build our operating system. So we're at their whim, which now we own it. So we get to do whatever we want with it. So I don't want it to be all downer though. There's some cool stuff going on out there.
Yeah, for sure. It'd just be nice that, like, let's say, I know scheduling always pops up. At least that's the bane of most people's existence in the fighters, or it's definitely the bane of the scheduler's existence. And a lot of time gets sucked into that. And there are certain programs that have to be utilized because that's what's been purchased that just don't do what people need to, or it just takes an extra amount of time. But if like another product popped up, like, hey, you know what? This one actually could be better if we went this route and like gave them the opportunity or had the ability to switch contractors like on the fly or at not these lengthy contracts. I don't know.
Yeah.
You guys are smart.
And we're seeing that.
I'm not very smart.
We're seeing that now. I mean, we're seeing bases as individual squadrons are like buying different programs, like the automated scheduler from Ops Lab or Duality. They're working on scheduling for like missile silos. So like individually squadrons are tackling this problem. I think the big hurdle is like, when do you stop funding the prime that gets the big money and then start replacing it? Because none of these programs fully replace a prime. Like it doesn't do, the interaction between the arms, which is the flying tracking program. So there's no interface between them. So that's like another thing. So none of these programs are like fully replacing a prime right now. So that's, the question is, how are they going to make that transition and do it smoothly? Because right now, that is still unfigured out.
I know you want to keep this positive, but here we go. Because you're just starting your reserve time. I don't think Bender has to mess with UTAPs at all. That's how you put your.
I did when I was a part timer. I did at Shaw.
Yeah, like jab a pin in my eye. Like I'm like, all right, I got to use this computer to log in and do it. And then I got to go to this computer and I got to use this browser to do this. Like it takes hours to put in something just to be able to go to work on orders, which is super frustrating. But here's a little gem, because I think Bender missed this since he's been on orders. But they sunset, Internet Explorer. That went away. I know you guys everyone in the world's aware of that, but who uses Internet Explorer? Well, I'll tell you who uses it. The United States Air Force and UTAPs. And there's like, hey, we got all these like special workarounds. Like you got to go in here and do this to this browser and then go over to this browser and do this. Like there was like no plan, like, hey, it's sunsetting, but yeah, we don't have a plan in place to have a new program that could be, I mean, I don't know coding, but I probably could come up with something after watching some YouTube videos that might be better. But the fact that you're like, hey, like, it's just these simple things, like these programs and this technology exist in the public space that could be utilized, and just like, hey, we're going to change the logos, and oh yeah, you need this and that. Like we'll change the funnels of how these lines are going to run the code, and off the races you go. It's like dealing with web developers. Like they can build an awesome website and change this and this around really quickly. Like, I don't know. We use software so much in our day to day, and it seems like that is a recurring theme outside of the jet to be a bane of existence. Just as a huge time suck.
Well, it's embarrassing. It's freaking humiliating. Our IT it's so embarrassing.
Yeah, it's shameful.
It is. I got a new computer like 3 days ago, and I like docked it. It took me like 7 days to finally like get the thing to recognize the domain or whatever, all this bullcrap security stuff. And then I like go to open up Outlook, and it's like, oh, we didn't put Microsoft Office on that computer. Like, why?
Yep.
Like, it literally has no other programs on it. Like, what do you think I'm going to use this for? Like, well, did you want Microsoft Office? Like, yes, I freaking want Microsoft. Like, I want PowerPoint and Outlook. That's it. Just put it on. Like, okay, it's going to take 3 more days or whatever. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is not science fiction. I mean, it doesn't even make. I mean, it's bad. If we should take every congressman and every senator and replace all their IT with Air Force IT. Like, give us, $90 billion to figure this out, and then you don't get your new computers until like you got to work on our computers basically until you give us the funding.
Well, they actually changed that. So now, because there used to be a requirement in that any computer bot had to go through COM, and COM had to like buy the computer out. And they realized that COM didn't know what they were doing for the most part. So now you can just buy it. Like you can go on GSA and just buy whatever computer. So if your squadron has the cash and they're like, everybody gets like a sports car laptop, cool, buy them. Like you're not in trouble for that. But they are, it's not just COM though. Like, oh, I was so mad. So I'm coming up here on training orders. So I'm in the Air National Guard and I'm on training orders. And then before I was on these orders, I was on temporary AGR. So I was just a temp AGR, which is like a full-time active duty person. You're just in the Guard. But my temporary AGR orders ended on the 2nd, and my training orders started on the 3rd. And so I had the 2nd was the day they did not overlap. So for 24 hours, I was not on orders. So I was out of everything. Deers. I was like, I got emails from the VA because they're like, hey, good, like what is it? A good start or ready start or whatever.
Yeah.
So I had to call Deers. I'm driving up here, call Deers, which is like the manage your dependents. And they're on the 3rd and say, hey, I'm actually on orders. And they're like, oh, you are? Well, reactivate your account. And they're like, make sure you call TRICARE because obviously we won't. And then I call TRICARE and they're like, oh yeah, well, you guys are like getting pulled back into the system. None of your pre-set up things still exist because you were out for an entire day. And I was like, cool. Why wouldn't this be the case? You know?
Yeah. They can erase things really fast. They can't load them.
Yeah.
There was some guy who was telling a story that, he was on an AGR tour, and this is off a Facebook post for my current job, but he switched. That job got divested, and so he got hired at a new unit. Well, he owed like $17 and call it 69 cents off a travel voucher, you know, again, that didn't get processed and, you know, like how you even get notified for it. But since that job went away, like it closed, like they had no access to any of his accounts, which I now understand because when I moved jobs, it was like I was brand new to the Air Force, even though I was still in the reserves. I had to you need it's like 17 pages of financial documents you have to submit. I'm like, you don't need this, do you? You already have all that. Like, oh no, sir, we need all that. I'm like, it's literally the same bank account you've been paying me since I was in college. Like no change. Like, sir, we need all that. I'm like, God, how broken is this? So now this is why it makes sense. Like his job goes away. He moves, he owes $17.69. Well, DFAS tried to reach out to him multiple times. That's the finance people. And they sent him to collections. So he went to collections. And by the time he found out about this is when the collectors are calling, and he gets in touch with DFAS and they email him what they have been mailing him. And so he goes, he's like, where did you mail this to? He's having the lady on the other line read it. She goes, like, reads the address. He goes, okay, where did you mail it? And she reads it again. She's getting irritated. He goes, you mailed it to yourself. And she it took a minute for her to realize. So they DFAS, they didn't have his address. So they like auto-generated this and then were self-mailing themselves this guy's balance, you know? And you're like, and I guess that could happen anywhere, but you're like, yeah. And that's when anyone's like, we want more government to solve our problems. I'm like, no, you, being a part of a fighter squadron, and when you walk in at the end of the year and there's all these flat screen TVs because they had to spend all the money, and you're like, this is probably one of the highest functioning organizations in the DoD. And here we go.
And that's one of the worst parts is it's not even, we were talking to, I think it was very minimally, but we were talking to Slander Entine about kind of spending money, and because there's different dollars can be spent on different things. So you're like, hey, we want to buy innovation stuff. We want to buy human performance stuff. Like we all have back problems. Let's get something like a game ready. And they're like, you can't spend that money on that. You have to spend it on like office equipment. And so they literally force you just to waste it or lose it, which talking to Slander, no one's just going to let that money go because someone else is going to allocate that money to their own Veridesks and big screen TVs. Right. So, and they're going to look like the shiny pen.
The Veridesk is awesome. Yeah.
If I could go back 5 years, I'd invest in Veridesk. Dang it.
For sure. Yeah.
One of those missed opportunities.
There's still time.
Yeah. There's going to be. I know even
like, right? What's that?
Oh, I was going to say next year, there's going to be end of year funds again. So, you got the chance. Yeah. Most Veridesk
artists on top of each other.
Yeah. Go super tall. Yeah. Rain, I gotta tell this story because I've been waiting probably over a decade now to tell this story.
Oh man.
Everybody who's heard Rain's background. So obviously he was a FAPE. Bender was a FAPE as well. They were Bender was RAM back then. And then Rain was Muddy. And which I have to say, both of you totally good dudes. As the student going through, everybody was like, oh, they're cool IPs and CFIs. So I'm one of the first people, and it's not even a but, it's actually very funny. But There's the but. So I'm one of the first people to go through pre-contact. And at the time there was like a pre-contact check ride. You have like 6 flights in the airplane or something. You're very young in the airplane. Yeah. And so I fly my pre-contact with Rain and I fly my final contact with Bender at the time. But so I like meet up with Rain. We go fly the sortie. And before we do this sortie, they're like, hey, we just changed the grading system. Like it used to be like the higher the number, the better the score. And now it's like lower the number. Like it's like golf, you know, if you got a 0 E, it'd be a perfect sortie, you know? So I'm like, all right, cool. So low number's good. So I go out and fly and Rain's quiet. Like he just, you know, I mean, cause theoretically that's what's supposed to happen. I'm supposed to just fly the airplane. He's supposed to observe. And we get back and he asked me some questions and he's like, cool, man. Yeah, see ya. And I was like, all right, sweet. You know, went pretty good. So obviously my entire class like crowds around because I'm the first one to go through and do my check ride. And I'm like looking at it. I'm like, gosh, this isn't me. And I'm like counting. I'm like 1, 2, 3. And then it's like 25, 26, 27. And then I keep counting. It's like 32, 33, 34. And I get a 34G. And like my whole class watches me get a 34G. And they're like, how'd you not hook? And I was like, I don't know. Like he was such a good dude. He wouldn't hook me. And one of the dudes in my class was like, hey man, good job. I was like, thank you. But, oh man, it was just comical. Cause I was like, oh man, I just got destroyed on that one. But it cracked me up, but super nice. Seafy. Yeah, that's right.
Super nice. I remember those days. Cause it was like, normally that probably would have been like a 3, like a 4G or, you know, like that, like if it was like a 1, 2 or 3, that'd been an E, then like a 3, you know, 3, 4, like somewhere there. Like that's kind of like the normal score you've gotten, which is all like make believe. Cause if you look at everyone's grade sheets, they switched it. So for those listening, like basically you got unsatisfactory, satisfactory, fair, good, excellent. And that's where the G or the E comes from. If they failed the check ride, it'd be a U. And the number of downgrades, meaning how the number that are not excellent. So if you got a good instead of excellent, that's 1, then another mark, whatever. But I remember like there was a lot of consternation because again, like you're hearing the other classes like, oh, dude, you got 34G. Like he's terrible. Like that would never happen beforehand. But I remember I flew with one girl and it was the worst check ride I ever did. Like it was heinous. She tried to go wrong way in the pattern. I think it was like a 70 something, 75. It was out. I mean, it was the most, but it was just so bad. Like I hooked her on multiple items. You try not to do that, like just compounding, right? But like it was so bad and so unsafe and several different categories. And I remember like standing at the crew bus because I was like trying to be nice, kind of ease the tension there a little bit. I know there's some nerves. So like before we went to fly, I'm like, yeah, what do you want to do? Like, you know, want to go fly E10s. It's prior enlisted. And so you're trying to, okay, cool. And then the sortie did not go towards like, hey, you're going to track T-38s. This is kind of done now.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, some
people know that straight up. You're like, nope. Not gonna happen.
I think when I told her that she didn't pass and for the number of reasons she didn't pass, and then I'm sure, I guess, you know, like every student goes back and sees their grade sheet and counts what they got. Cause sometimes you got told, like I remember my pre-contact was with it wasn't with Con Krychek, but I went back to the flight room cause he was a FAPE, like the oldest FAPE in existence. And he's like, what'd you get? I'm like, I don't know. He just said, good job. And he like pulled it up and then like went to count it. But I'm sure I didn't tell her, hey, that's going to be a 75U or whatever. It was like, she found out afterwards. And Carl Miller, was like one of her instructors. And he's like, dude, you just destroyed that. And I was like, it was really bad. It was really bad in so many different ways, but here we are. Yeah.
Hey,
for everyone.
No, that was, it was good. But that's what pilot training's for. Like it's to be like graded and judged and stuff. So, I mean, I understood it. And it was one of those at the time where I was like, oh, kiss fighters, goodbye, you know, but turns out it worked out. So, but yeah, it was.
Well, hopefully Again, that was like a transition. Like, but I imagine I obviously going to Vipers right out of pilot training, going to the 38. It wasn't like there was a bunch of 38s and Vipers just sitting around when you went through. Everyone else's scores, mirrored that grading system, hopefully.
Yeah, it was. I was definitely a slow boil. Like I think I started out T6s on cap. Like I was not prepared, because it turns out I didn't actually have any academic challenges before pilot training. So it was definitely like, oh, okay, this is not easy. So it took a little while, but yeah, I think I got a little lucky with people who could have gone 38s wanted T1s. And I was like, sure, but yeah, it worked out. I think I had the exact opposite happen in 38s. I got a 4U. And I was like, well, at least it was a low number, but, yeah, I didn't meet the climb out, and he hooked me because it was the departure restriction of like 7,000 by this radial. And I was like, who even knows that? But
yeah, that's the thing. That's you're probably used to going straight to the airspace right off the end of the runway. And the one time you have to fly the arc or something.
Well, it was legit. Like on my check ride. There was clouds at 5,000. My buddy, Butcher Baker, who's awesome. He's doing an exchange to England now. He might be an astronaut. He's a test pilot, but he overshoots on the rejoin out of traffic. And so I level off because obviously, and I don't make the radio call like, hey, departure leveling off at 5,000, not going to meet the climb restriction. And so I fly a good sortie aside from the climb out. And it was like, well, you're going to see that one again. And then my flight commander was like, what happened? And I was like, this. So he literally made me pass the 7,000 feet. And he's like, I got the jet. And then I didn't do anything. I just sat in the front seat for like an hour.
Yeah. Those are the best kind of check rides.
Yeah.
I'd be like, hey, if you do it exactly like this, it'll take 15 minutes and then I get to fly the rest of the mission. Just do it.
It's
like
best for everybody.
Vader used to fly together.
Yeah.
What's that?
Those were good times.
Yeah.
I'll say, when me and Bender would always fly together, and we'd take the jets for like the last 15, 20 minutes of every sortie, which is probably not good, but
made us better pilots.
That's right. We were honing our craft.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Those kids didn't want to fly anymore anyways. They just wanted to watch.
That's right. Well,
especially on check rides. They were just like, take the plane. Like if the sooner I can not possibly hook, the better. Yeah. Oh man.
100%.
I hooked my instrument ride in T6s, which, and this could just be because I load my ego or whatever, but like looking back, I'm like, I would have given myself like an excellent for sure. Like I got slam dunked on this approach. I made it all happen. I threw down my gear right before crossing the threshold. I was like, nailed it. Like I just made that happen, like super athletic. And then I get back, he's like, you hooked, because it wasn't all stable 3 miles before the final approach fix, and I've just been flying like that my entire career though. So now I'm like, that he didn't get it. Like honestly, he was a plant eater, if you will. Like that's not how it should be. You should have been like, dude, that was awesome. I can't believe you made that approach happen.
It wasn't unsafe because he didn't take it from you. So again, that's when it's like, all right, basketball or golf clap there. Like I'm impressed. This guy's got it.
Yeah.
I got told one time that if you had any more closure, you would have overshot like on a rejoin. Cause I was just like screaming in there, just like, wow. And then just like idle speed brakes, and then just like parked it. And the instructor was like, yeah, you got lucky. Like that was not on purpose. Like, you got a grade with yourself.
Yeah.
Look at me now.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. Oh man.
Well, sweet guys. I think this was successful other than my recording shenanigans. I don't think you're gonna have any video on mine end, but you got no one to see my face. A couple little flips here and there, but yeah, what can you do? So parting shots. I'm glad we got before we.
Well, I'm glad we got a chance to chat. We've been trying to make this happen for weeks, but yeah, I'll keep you guys updated on the old F-15C TX because there's going to be a lot of shenanigans. I can already tell because I'm focusing more on shooting missiles instead of ground ops. So it's probably going to end poorly.
We need to do a weekly debrief with how's it going with Vader? Listen to what happened this week.
Oh gosh. Oh yeah.
Hope's
Bender's kicked off. I think I'm by myself right now in the recording.
It's just going to be a monologue that doesn't make sense because there's like a third of the conversation.
That's right. I will tell your story. Just posted it as a.
Just his video where it's like smiling and occasionally laughing.
I need a screenshot just so I can have proof that there were other people here with me. Vader's lost his mind.
Yeah, he photoshopped that. Eagle stuff.
Yeah.
Cool.
Get ready. There's going to be a lot of stories. I guarantee it. I assume, knock on lumber, there'll be some overGs. So we'll talk about them.
This could be great. Awesome. See you guys.
All right. See you.
Well, I hope you enjoyed this episode with Vader and Bender. Again, Jocko's episode drops on Friday, and that's available currently for Patreon supporters and has been for about the past week. If you're interested in supporting the podcast, swing over to patreon.com/the Afterburn Podcast. And as always, if you're willing to drop a rating and review over on iTunes and Spotify, that helps the podcast out. We'll see you next time.